So using this setting, you can block all the public access. So if you don't want your buckets to be publicly available, you can just using this one single setting, you can block the access. In black box testing, we don't have anything.
Yes.
So client will come to us, they will say that, hey, this is my company, and we have our environment set up in AWS infrastructure. Can you please pen test it and find any issues that they are present in their environment?
So what all things do a user or a pen tester needs to be aware about when he's moving to client, or how is it different from the normal pen testing scenario?
You cannot reuse it, or you cannot share it with other identities. So that's the major difference between managed policies and inline policies. In this IAM service, we will define a set of permissions, and based on the permissions, the user can access the services if they are allowed to. If they are denied, they will not able to access any of the service.
Hello audience, today we are going to discuss about AWS Pentesting. I am Tarak Sakardande. I work as security consultant at Redfox Security. At Redfox Security, we provide end-to-end comprehensive penetration tests, and apart from that, we have a number of things going on that is ranging from courses to trainings to conferences, a number of things. So you can always check out our content that is freely available on our website, that is https://redfoxed.com. If you want more of information and want to have a more wiser choice, I would suggest you to go and check the training.redfoxed.com, where we have premium courses offered, right from web applications to Active Directory and a number of things. So we have a number of content talking about YouTube. We have all the trainings, and also we have videos about hardware, Active Directories, and stuff like that. So with me, I have one of our foxes, that is Shashi. Please introduce yourself to the audience.
So hi guys, my name is Shashi and I am a senior security consultant at Redfox Security. So today we are going to be talking about AWS Pentesting, one of the topics that is very dear to my heart, because this is a very fascinating topic. So this podcast is going to be geared toward the audience who is just beginner in this space, which is cloud pen testing. So all these things we are going to show you. First, I am in this video or in this podcast, I am going to be showcasing all the topics which the beginner can learn and get started with AWS pen testing. So yeah, fun podcast.
It's really going to be a fun podcast. And apart from AWS pen testing, we have a number of podcasts that we already delivered, and there are upcoming podcasts as well. So do check it out on our YouTube channel.
So just a disclaimer guys, so whatever information that I am showcasing here, please don't, all the tools that I will show here, don't run it on the other companies without any authorization. So if you want to practice in your local lab, that you can set up. So yeah, that's...
because if in any case you get into any trouble, Redfox Security is not responsible for it.
Yeah.
Okay. So Shashi, can you tell me, there are a number of cloud pen testing that is really happening. So it's from Azure, and then why AWS to be specific?
So why AWS? Because there is no I am not discriminating among different cloud providers, but why AWS for this podcast? Because I think AWS is from the inception of the cloud. So I think from 2005, 2006, so they are the early movers.
Yes.
Hence, they have the advantage to capture the market. So that's why most of the companies have hosted their infrastructure on AWS. Now they are because they have choices now.
Yes.
Now they are switching to different cloud providers like Azure, GCP, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So, but why primarily AWS? Because that's what we are getting pen tests for, mostly AWS.
Yes.
So that's why I want to start with AWS. Yes. Maybe in later podcast we will be discussing about Azure, which is also growing.
Definitely, we are definitely going to do that. Yes. So we can start off with the...
Okay. So So what I will do, I have slides prepared already.
Yeah.
So I will go through the slides, and from the slides I will teach about the basic concept that you need about AWS, that the student or the learner should know to get started with AWS pen testing. Yeah. And in the end I will have a practical video as well, so that all the theory that they have learned they can implement there.
Yes.
So again, this is my local lab.
Yeah.
It's not a client's network or a client website. Anything I'm going to showcase here is just my local lab.
Okay. So one thing I really like what he said, I would like to second that, is because the best thing about our podcast is we don't just not offer you theoretical stuff, but also practicals, and that are really something that you can implement in your pen tests as well.
Yeah.
So without any further ado, let's get started with the podcast.
So yeah, that's the introduction to AWS penetration testing. So first, the viewer should know what is AWS, right? Before pen testing AWS, right? So AWS is the leading cloud service provider, as we just saw, because they are the early movers. They have around 30 to 40% of the market captured. So most of the companies have already hosted their infrastructure from the on-premise to the cloud.
Yes.
And they have opted for AWS because, as I told you, the other cloud providers like Azure and GCP are a bit late, but that's why the AWS is from the starting.
Okay.
And what are the key services provided by AWS? So they provide storage services, compute services, networking services, and plethora of other services as well that we are going to be discussing in this podcast as well. So, and why companies are using the AWS? Because they don't have to worry about the infrastructure. So the infrastructure that AWS has created is already secured. And if they can just host their app on their infrastructure, then they don't have to worry about the infrastructure cost, right? They mostly have to not the infrastructure cost, but they don't have to worry about the infrastructure security.
It's true. It only works in web applications, right, where there are a lot of files and stuff. Images are being actually stored in the S3 buckets.
That's why. So they only have to worry about the securing their application. So that's the separation there. So the infrastructure security, they don't have to worry about anything like that. And another thing is that AWS is a global service. The infrastructure of AWS is located in many regions, and under regions they have availability zones. So what is availability zones? Availability zone is like a data center. So let's take Mumbai region. So in Mumbai regions, they will have 2-3 availability zones. So that if let's suppose a disaster happens on one availability zone, then it means that the other availability zone is protected. So also in AWS, it's a very resilient service. Hence, whatever you save, it will be replicated across multiple regions or multiple availability zones. So if your data gets hampered in one of the regions, it will be already saved in other regions, so you can fetch it from there. So that's why this AWS is a resilient, scalable service offered by Amazon. So yeah, that's the basic overview of AWS. Let's move to the next slide. So why are companies shifting to AWS or in cloud particular, right? So these are some of the major issues that the companies are facing with their on-prem infrastructure. The first thing is that the legacy hardware infrastructure that they have is now old, and it is a hassle for them to operate them, because there are many times the hardware will fail. Any disaster happens, it's the responsibility of the company, right? But that's why AWS or other cloud provider come into picture, and now they're shifting their all on-premise infrastructure to the cloud, so that now it's the
responsibility of the cloud provider to take care of all of this stuff. Okay.
The other thing is that the infrastructure that AWS has created is highly scalable and available. So as I told you, how it's available and scalable because of the regions and the availability zones that they have created. That is the reason. Other thing is that it is cost effective as well, because let's suppose a company has hosted their website on their on-premise infrastructure. So they have purchased all the hardware that they need. But let's suppose the traffic is not coming to their websites. So all this hardware is spared, right? Like no capacity is being used. But Amazon is like pay as you go model. So it means that you basically, if the website is getting a lot of traffic, then you can scale and pay accordingly. And if the website is not getting that much of traffic, then you can scale down
as per your needs.
So you don't have to be pay for the cost that is not needed for the spare hardware that you had on your on-premise systems, right? So that's the another thing. It's highly cost effective. Another thing is that it provides automation as well as efficiency, so that in a matter of minutes you can spin up your infrastructure. So that's what I have also done using this. So the lab I have created is fully automated. So yeah, that's how you can automate to create infrastructure on AWS.
Okay.
So it's very easy to do that.
That's great.
Yeah. Let's move on to the services that are offered by AWS.
Yeah.
So these are some of the services, but there, as I told you, there are plethora of services that are provided by AWS. I think it's more than hundreds, but these are some of the major ones. And in this podcast, we will be focusing on IAM, EC2, and S3.
Yes.
So we will start with that, and in later podcast, we will discussing about other services that AWS offers. So yeah, let's start with the first one, which is IAM, which is the Identity and Access Management Service.
Yes.
So this is one of the, I would say that the most important service that a penetration tester need to know to get started in AWS service, because this is the service that handles the permissions part.
Okay.
So if the permissions are secure, it means the infrastructure or the app is secure, right?
Yes.
So that's why we have to be very careful, or the students or the learners have to learn this IAM in detail. Yeah, right. The identity and access management. Then we have EC2. EC2 is the cloud computing service provided by AWS, which are the virtual machines that you can just spin up on the AWS infrastructure. So EC2 is just like a virtual machine that is hosted on a AWS infrastructure. Then we have the S3 service, which is the object storage service. So if you want to save files or your data or logs somewhere, then you can opt for S3 service of AWS, and it is a cost-effective service as well, this S3 service. Then we have the RDS service. So RDS is the relational database services. So let's suppose that in your on-premises environment, you have your databases, right? Oracle, MySQL, or any other.
Yes.
So, but you again, they have their own learning curve. So that's why if a team or the company don't want to be go specific on that software system, they can opt for RDS service. So RDS service also offers the Oracle, MySQL database services.
Okay.
So you don't have to worry about the security of that part.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, that's actually good, because you are investing, already you have AWS and they are securing all of the stuff for you.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then we have the another services, which is Lambda. Lambda is the serverless computing service offered by AWS. So let's suppose you want to automate some things in infrastructure. So you can do that with Lambda. So Lambda is like a small piece of code running on AWS infrastructure. So that's why we are saying serverless computing, because you don't have to worry about the infrastructure. Like let's suppose we take the EC2 service, right?
Yes.
So if we spin up a EC2 instance, then we have to set up the EC2 system for our web application, right? Yeah. But when we take the Lambda, it has all the environment ready on AWS. You just have to write your piece of code and it will run. And using that, you can just automate stuff. Then we have the VPC service, which is a virtual private cloud. It's a isolated network in cloud.
Okay.
Right? It's a virtual private cloud, right? As the name suggests, it's a isolated virtual private cloud that is only dedicated to you.
Okay.
Okay. No one can interfere in that. Okay. So it's so if you want to set up anything related to networking, you have to learn about VPC, which is virtual private cloud service.
Oh, okay. So these were some of the these were the major services that were offered by AWS. Can you so a lot of folks, they are in the Active Directory stuff of things, right? So they are pen testing Active Directories, but now, as you said, that we are moving to cloud. So as you just indicated, there was an identity access management. So what all things do a user or a pen tester needs to be aware about when he's moving to client, or how is it different from the normal pen testing scenario?
So it's not that different. I think
because a lot of folks they kind of are scared, or you get it, right? Because this cloud is being introduced all of a sudden. So what's your lookout?
Yeah, as I said that it's only the infrastructure that you are using, but all the operating system or all the software solutions that you already have, you are just migrating it to the AWS.
Okay.
So using AWS as well, you can set up your Active Directory environment. So but the security of the Active Directory environment is not depend on AWS. It's your responsibility to secure Active Directory environment. It's the infrastructure, the below infrastructure that AWS has to take care of, not you.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah. So these are some of the services. So let's look at the AWS cloud pen testing. Okay. So generally, when we are talking about testing AWS environments or cloud environments in general, then we are mainly focusing on the misconfigurations that can happen in a cloud environment. So generally AWS don't have any vulnerability, not don't have the they generally don't have the vulnerabilities. I mean to say that their infrastructure is secure.
Yes.
But it's the responsibility of the company or the client. So to make this infrastructure, all the configurations that the AWS provide, to set it up in a proper manner.
Okay.
If they are setting these things in AWS in a misconfigured way, then their environments are going to be hacked, right?
Yes.
So yeah, when we are talking about the cloud pen testing, we are generally testing the misconfigurations
Yes.
that are present in their company's client's AWS
Yes.
infrastructure.
So this is more of like the human errors, right?
Yeah.
So
As
that is why that's called a misconfiguration.
Yeah. That's why. So in this podcast we will be focusing on the misconfigurations that can happen in IAM, S3 and EC2 instance services.
Okay.
And apart from that, we have other mainly two types of testing that is available in AWS, which is white box testing and black box testing. So white box testing is where the client will give us the credentials of just a normal user, and using the privileges of the normal user, we can see what services that user can access. Are there privilege escalation vectors that this normal user can perform by exploiting the misconfigurations, if there are any.
Yes.
That is what white box testing is. When we talk about black box testing, in black box testing, we don't have anything.
Yes.
So client will come to us, they will say that, hey, this is my company, and we have our environment set up in AWS infrastructure. Can you please pen test it and find any issues that they are present in their environment, right? So we don't have anything. So how do we go about this in black box testing? So in black box testing, first we look for the subdomains of the company's websites, and maybe we look for OSINT. We will apply OSINT techniques, like are there any leaked credential in the GitHub, or maybe they have leaked credential in the dark web. That can also happen. Apart from that, we also have another type of thing where let's suppose we find some of the applications that are public facing of the company, right?
Yes.
And we know that they are running on AWS infrastructure, right? So we try to find our way from their public facing website to the AWS infrastructure.
Yep.
So these are some of the ways we can pen test the AWS cloud.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. Now let's talk about the most important service offered by AWS, which is Identity and Management Access Service. Okay. Identity and Access Management Service. So this is a service which manages access and permissions in AWS. So whenever you create a AWS account, so with that account, IAM service will be created. Okay. And this IAM service will be linked to your AWS account. So think of this IAM service as a database which has all the permissions stored in it. And when a user wants to perform any action on the AWS account, they have to go through this IAM service.
Okay.
And then from their IAM service, the IAM service will define whether this identity or user is allowed to access this service or not. So that's what IAM service is. As we can see here, that a user who wants to access these services, they have to go through this IAM firewall. This is not a firewall, but IAM service. Okay. So in this IAM service, we will define a set of permissions, and based on the permissions, the user can access the services if they are allowed to. If they are denied, they will not able to access any of the service.
Okay, so IAM is basically acting as the authorization part.
Access control. Yeah. Then let's talk about IAM identities. So there are primarily three types of identities in AWS. The first one is your user identity, which are your normal humans or normal users or applications. Then we can have another identity which is called group. Group is like a collection of rated users. So if you want a number of users to be assigned to a group, then you can use groups, and then you can assign permission to that group. Then all the users that are present in that group will inherit those permissions. Then we have the role, which is another identity in AWS. So role is mainly used to delegate permission to AWS services. So this is one of the identity which is not understood well. So I will explain it through an example. So let's suppose there is a service called EC2, a virtual machine, and they want to access some data on that is stored on S3 service, right?
Yes.
But how can they access it? Because this has IAM policies, right?
Yes.
They cannot just access it. They need some credentials, right? So what we will do, first we will create a role. To that role, we can assign permissions.
Yes.
And then we can attach this role to the EC2 instance. Or we can say that the EC2 instance can assume that role. And once the EC2 instance can assume that role, it means that it can have all the permissions that we have set up in the role identity, and then using that permission, it can access the S3 resources that they want to access from the EC2 instance. So I hope role is clear to you, right?
Yeah.
Apart from that, we have a super user in AWS as well, that is called root user. And from that user, basically this root user has all the privileges in the environment, but you can create other users based on the privileges that you want to give to that user. Okay, that you can also do. But yeah, so generally in our pen test, the requirement from the client is that we want to escalate to the root user, or maybe we want to escalate to some storage services that they have stored their data in. So these are some of the requirements that comes from client. Basically the rules of engagement. Okay.
Also, I am pretty sure these are the main three things that you also told us at the services part, right? That was IAM and storage S3.
Yeah.
Yep. Another reason.
Yeah. Then we have access keys in AWS. So how a user can log in? They need credentials, right? So AWS provide two types of keys, which is called long-term keys and short-term keys. So long-term keys are used for consistent access to AWS resources or services. Basically, there are two types of long-term keys. First one is your user credentials that are normal, your username and password. And apart from that, AWS also has access keys, which are also long-term keys, which you can use it to programmatically access AWS resources or services. Okay, so it's like just a key ID, and it's just an ID and a key that you can use. And apart from that, AWS also offers short-term keys. So these are the temporary credentials that provide limited access to AWS services, like for a very short period of time. So generally it is done via temporary tokens. So the role that I told you, right?
Yes.
So when we assign a role, it will get a temporary token. And this token will be valid for 15 minutes to the 36-hour max. Okay, so these are the two types of access keys. Now, let's talk about IAM identity permissions policies. As I told you, all the authorization will happen through this IAM, and IAM has attached some set of policies, right? So yeah, what is this permission policy, right? How we can read it, right? So this permission policy is a set of security statements that allow or deny access to AWS resources. Okay. And we can attach these permission policies to the AWS identities, which are your users, groups, roles. So if, let's suppose I want to give a user some permissions to access his files that is stored on AWS S3 bucket. So to this user, I will assign permissions. I will attach these permission policies, and in that permission policy, I will define how this user can access that, and what resources in S3 bucket they can access. Don't worry, I am going to showcase how it will look like. Yeah. So don't worry about that. And these permission policies are also known as policy document, and they are written in JSON format. Okay. So let's see this. So this is how the permission, this policy document will look like on your right hand side. So let's understand this. So first is the version, which is the version of the policy, which is by default it's 2012. So I think Microsoft have not updated it since 2012. Then we have statement. In the statement, we will define the permission policies, right? So it starts with statement ID, which identifies the statement. It is an optional field, but it is like giving a small description to your statement, right? So in this case, this SID is set to S3 full access. It means that we want to give S3 full access to maybe some bucket, okay, as the name suggests. But as I said, it's an optional field. It's depend on the architect, whatever they want to give, right? Then we have the effect. So effect specifies whether the statement is allowed or denied. So if we want this user to allow some actions on some resources, we will give allow, and if we want the users to deny permission, we will just give deny. Okay. Then we have actions. So actions are a list of specific AWS service. So action is like what we want to perform on that resource, right? So in this scenario, we have a list bucket get S3 is the service name, then list bucket is the name of the action. So it's all defined in actions. We can give a list of actions as well. So we have, as in the example, it says S3 list bucket. It means we are allowing listing of the S3 bucket. And if we have get object, it means that we are allowing the identity to get that object. And finally, we have the resources. So resources are the actual, basic resources are the AWS resources like S3, EC2, on which we want to give access to the identity. So again, we have identity, we have resource. And if you want to give access to this resource, we have to attach some policy to this identity, right? And based on the identity, they can access. And if you see in this scenario, we have resource. The resource is defined that S3 bucket. So if we assign this or if we attach this permission policy to identity, it means they have full control, not the full control, but they have these, they can perform these actions like list buckets, get object, put object, delete object, basically full control of this on this resource, which is example bucket. Or example bucket / star, it means all the objects that are present in the example bucket. So they have all the access, all these actions on this example bucket or the object that are stored in this example bucket.
Correct.
So I hope this policy statement structure is clear, right? So this is very important to understand. So because you are going to see this a lot on your engagements, and you have to read it and you have to understand it so that you can know what is happening, because this is where misconfigurations can happen, right? So let's suppose that instead of this example bucket, if I have put just a star, it means that it will give access to all the S3 bucket, right? So that's why this is very important to know. Now let's understand types of IAM policies. So this is the policy statement that I show. There are two types of policies in AWS. The first one is AWS managed policies. The first one is managed policies and second one is inline policies. And in the managed policies, it has two types of other policies, which is AWS managed policies and customer managed policies. So first, let's learn about what is AWS managed policies, right? So AWS managed policies are predefined policies that are created and maintained by AWS, and they are generally used for general purposes. So let's suppose if you, again same example, if you want to give full access to an S3 bucket, AWS already has a predefined policy for that. So you don't have to create one, right? You can directly take that policy and attach to the identity. Okay. Then we have customer managed policies. So this is generally used for customizations to the policies that the AWS has. So let's suppose that you are not happy with the managed policies permissions that are defined in it, and you want to customize it according to your need. Okay. At that time, you can go opt for customer managed policies. This policy you have to create. Okay. And then what's the difference? And this let's talk about inline policies. So these inline policies are directly attached to the user. Okay. But the main difference, so you might be thinking, what is the difference between managed policies and inline policies, right? So managed policies are shared. Okay. So if you are using managed policy, okay, then you can attach a managed policy to n number of identities. But in case of inline policies, it is directly created and attached to a single identity. You cannot reuse it or you cannot share it with other identities. So that's the major difference between managed policies and inline policies. So if you want, so let's suppose there is an identity and they want some specific access. So you can just create an inline policy and attach it to them then and there. Don't have to opt for managed policies. Okay, but if you want policies that you want to apply on n number of identities, let's suppose to all the users in a company, then you can opt for managed policies, and because these are shared, right? So whatever settings in that policy will be affected to all the identities. Okay, so these are the two types of IAM policies. I know it's a lot of theory because before going to the practice, you have to understand this theory part so that you will be able to understand it properly.
Sure. Can you
Right.
give the viewers a quick recap of all the stuff that we discussed right now?
Yeah, so we started off with the AWS. Why AWS? Why companies are switching to AWS? Then we see how can we perform a penetration test of AWS. And then we started off with the IAM, which is one of the major service that you need to know.
Yes.
So that's why we are taking a bit of time on these IAM policies because they are very important because all the permission and authorization will go through this service.
Exactly.
So that's why it's
and it's always great, even though it's theory, but it's always great to understand what's really happening.
anyway you have to learn it.
That's true.
Right. So now let's talk about Amazon resource name, short for ARN. So ARN basically identifies a resource. So there are lots of resources in AWS, right?
Yes.
So how you can uniquely identify that? So you can uniquely identify using ARN. So ARN is just a string which uniquely identifies a resource in AWS.
Okay.
And it is used to refer a single resource or a group of resources. If you see my previous example here, you see in the resource section, you see two ARNs there,
Yes.
right? So first one is to specify a specific object, which is the S3 bucket, which is example bucket in our case. And if we want to specify or a list of objects, then you can use this bucket /star. It means it will point to all the objects in that bucket. So a group of objects. So that you can also specify using ARN. Then this is the format of ARN. So first we have ARN. Then we have the partition name. Partition name is generally AWS. Unless you are operating in China, for China it is AWS-CHN. But most of the time you will see AWS as the ARN. Okay, AWS as the partition. Then we have the service name. So which can be your, if the resource is a EC2 instance service, it will show EC2. If your resource is a S3 bucket, it will show S3 there.
Yes.
So based on the service, it will change. Then we have the region in which your service is in. So region can be like AP South one, which is for Mumbai, US West one for Virginia. I think US East one is the for Virginia. So this is how you can define.
Yes.
Then we have the account ID, which is the account ID of the AWS account. Then finally we have the resource ID. Okay. So this is how you can uniquely specify a resource using ARN. So this is the format that AWS follows. The other format is the below one, in which you will specify, if you see in the end, it's resource type / resource ID. And these are some of the few examples that I have given. So the first example is that we are basically representing a AWS instance, EC2 instance. So this is how you can do that. So first we have the ARN, it starts with ARN. Then the partition name, which is AWS.
Yes.
Then the name of the service, which is EC2. Then we have the name of the region, which is AP-South 1, which is the Mumbai region. And then we have the name of the account. Finally, we will have the resource type, which is instance. And then the / resource ID, which is the ID of the EC2 instance. Also another thing that AWS services, some of the AWS services are global and some of them are regional. So if it is a regional service, then this is the first format it will follow. But if it is a global service, it will not have the AWS account or the region. So that's why you will see ARN AWS S3 : images. It will not have the region as well as the account ID because it's a global service, right? And if you want to represent a group of resources, then you can use the wildcard, which is /star. So in this case, it is representing all the objects in this images bucket.
Good.
So I hope you have an idea of how you can uniquely identify a resource in AWS using ARN. Okay. So I think this is all about IAM. Tariq, if you have any questions, you can ask about IAM. Okay. So now let's talk about another service, which is S3 service, which is simple storage service. So S3 is the storage service offered by AWS. So if you want to, let's say if you want to save your files or if you want to save your backups, your media files, then you can opt for S3 bucket option. So yeah, it is also, as you can see, it's a scalable, secure and highly durable storage service to store any amount of data. So whenever, let's suppose that you want to save your data, let's suppose in a Mumbai region. So whenever you save your data in the Mumbai region, your data will be replicated across all the availability zones that are in AWS, that are in this Mumbai region. So let's suppose a disaster happens on one of your availability zone, it means one of your data centers, then your data is already replicated in other availability zone, right? So you can just access from there, right? As a user, you will not know that you have to go to which availability zone. I mean, AWS will do all this for you, okay? And there are two type of entities in S3. The first one is the S3 bucket, and other one is the object. So S3 bucket is like a container of objects. It's like a folder, and in that folder you can store your objects. So object represents the data as well as its metadata. So whenever you save your file on an S3 bucket, the file will have the metadata as well. So when it was uploaded, things like that. So that's what object represents. The object itself as well as all the metadata that this data has. Okay. So these are the two identities or two entities of S3. Now let's talk about how these S3 buckets are secured, right? So there are some access control policies in S3 buckets that you can use to secure a bucket. So whenever you create a bucket, it is private by default. It means no one can access it. Okay, no one can publicly access it, or no one from any other AWS account can access it. So you have to apply some access control policies on these S3 buckets so that it can be accessed by the principals or the users that you want to give access to, right? So there are three types of policies in S3 bucket with which you can provide access to this bucket. The first up is the bucket policies. So these are also called resource policies. So resource policy, this bucket policy is also called resource policy, right? So this you can directly attach to the bucket itself. Okay, the JSON format I showed you, right? So resource policy is similar to that. It is also in JSON format. So on that bucket, you can define which principal can perform which actions on this S3 bucket.
By the way, I have one question. Can this be misconfigured to be? Can this be misconfigured to be publicly accessible by any chance? Okay.
Yeah, but by default it will not happen.
Yeah, exactly. That I think that's what Sashi also told us previously in the presentation as well. What you said was these are not vulnerabilities as such; these are misconfigurations. All right.
So so by default it is private and secure. No one can access it. But let's suppose there is a bucket, and that bucket has many folders in it, and in those folders you have your data, right? But let's suppose you want to publicly available one set of folder, only one folder, but you have applied a policies which give access to all the objects or all the folders or anything in that bucket. It means the folder that is you want to publicly access, that will be available, as well as the other folders in that bucket that you want to be secure or confidential will be also available to the attackers, right? So that's why these bucket policies are required. Apart from these bucket policies, we have IAM policies as well. So IAM policies are directly attached to the identities, which are your users, groups or roles that we discussed. So you can also directly assign these IAM policies to the identity itself, and based on that, I think I showed an example, right, where we want access to example bucket. The one IAM policy I showed you, that IAM policy you can attach to the identity itself. Okay. Then finally we have access control lists. So they are used to provide granular permissions to the buckets or to the objects. But so when AWS started with S3 service, this was the only access control, which is access control list offered by AWS. But this is now a legacy access control method. But yeah, these are still in use. Okay. But the major ones, how we are setting up nowadays using bucket policy as well as the IAM policies. Okay. And this is where misconfigurations can happen. Okay. Yeah. Now let's talk about the another services, which is the cloud computing services provided by AWS, which is the EC2 services. So EC2 services provides virtual machines in cloud. Okay. Or maybe if you want to spin up your Docker instances, then you can opt for EC2 instance services. I think there is another service for Docker. I think it's Fargate in AWS. But for AWS is basically virtual machines. Okay. Yeah. So if you want to, let's say that the web is hosted on EC2 instance, and it is a lightweight app. It doesn't require any resources, right? So AWS offers multiple resource types as well. So if you want a heavy load machine, you can opt for that. If you want a small load machine, you can opt for that. So that's why, as I said, that AWS is cheap. That's why. Because if you want to go for a lower option, you can always go for that.
That's good.
Okay. Yeah, that's another thing. It is on-demand billing. So you only pay for the compute that you have used. Okay. So if your instance is down, you don't have to pay for that. And anytime you can up that instance, and then you have to pay for that. Okay. Pay for the compute time basically. Now let's talk about another service, which is the AWS Instant Metadata Services, which is attached to a EC2 instance. Okay. So this is one of the services which attackers can abuse. Okay. So it allows an EC2 instance to access metadata about the instance itself. So there are like many things that the instance should know, right? What is my network? What is my IP address? Which roles I can assume? These sort of things. So the EC2 instance can query out to this local endpoint, which is the instance metadata endpoint, which is hosted at http://169.254.169.254/. So this is the endpoint that they can query to access the data, and this is as we can see that the EC2 instance don't have to have the access to the internet. It can locally access it. Okay. And in this instance data, we have other things as well, as you can see that it has the networking information, instance role credentials, and even user data scripts. So if a attacker can access this service, they can query out the networking information, role credentials, which have the permissions. God knows what permission which these roles have. Then it also has the user data scripts, in which basically this user data script is the script that will run when a EC2 instance start. So generally it has the things which like automation things in which we can have the credentials as well. So these are some of the things that you can look for when you have access to the instant metadata service. Yeah, there are two types of instant metadata service. First one is IMDS v1, which is the older version, and then we have IMDS version 2, which is the current version. The older version is vulnerable to SSRF attacks. I think there is a very big breach to one of the companies which happened through this attack, which is SSRF attack. So using the SSRF, this is basically a web attack, right? So using this SSRF, they queried this internal metadata service. Okay, and then they can access the credential of the role, right? So using that, they have breached a very big company. I won't name the company, but it's already publicly available. So using this particular attack, SSRF attack, they can query if there is a website vulnerable to SSRF attacks. Then using that vulnerability, they can query this instant metadata service and get access to all these credentials that are saved.
Okay, and that takes me to our web application courses that are available at training.redfox.com as well. And if you want to read more about SSRF, that stands for server-side request forgery. If you want to get more knowledge about it, more information, you can always follow it at training.redfox.com, where we have premium courses as well. But again, there is a lot of content that has been given for free to you as well, so you can always check it out. And again, there's a playlist of Burp Suit that is being played, so you can always check there, and I have personally discussed SSRF attack in that as well, so do have a look.
So so to protect against these SSRF attacks, so Microsoft updated that IMDS service. Again, as you can see, this is the current version, which is IMDS v2, which is protecting against this SSRF attack. So now you have to require a session token using the put request. So you cannot just directly send a get request and query this, right? So that's what this IMDS v2 service is. This is comes with the EC2 service, which is basically the EC2 instance. Okay. Yeah, again, let me just go through what we have discussed. I think then we have a practical waiting for us.
Absolutely. The thing that's everyone always waiting for, it's practicals. So, yeah, obviously, I mean, please give the viewers a small recap of all the stuff that we discussed.
So, again, we started off with what is AWS, what are the services offered by AWS. Then we look at why AWS Pentesting is now prevalent because of the misconfiguration that are happening in the client infrastructure that is hosted on AWS. Then we saw the most important service, which is the identity access management service that the learner should know to basically master AWS Pentesting, because this is where all the permission, all the roles, all the authorizations are happening in AWS. Then we looked at the S3 service, which is the storage service provided by AWS. Then we see how this can be secured using access policies. Then finally we saw the EC2 instance service and how you can use EC2 instance service to spin up your virtual machines on AWS infrastructure. Finally, we saw the instant metadata service, which is a way, which provides a way for the machine to carry about information for itself. Okay. So there are many other services. Maybe in later podcast we will be discussing about all those services as well.
Yes.
As I said, there are hundreds of services provided by AWS. So major ones are these, which we just saw. So let's.
Before we jump onto practical, I know you are excited as well as our viewers are excited. But before we jump in, do remember that all of the educational content that is being discussed in this podcast as well as the practicals are for for educational purposes only. Please do not try this at your home, work or organization, because in case you get into any trouble, Redfox Security is not responsible for it. So without any further ado, please.
So again, this is a local lab that I have created. Let me just go to this. Let me just log in. Okay. So I already have a Kali machine I have with me. So all the attacks I am going to performing through this Kali machine.
So to perform this pen test, do I need to have authorized permission from AWS so that I can do? Yeah.
Actually. So let's suppose a client comes to you and they want you to access their application that is hosted on AWS.
Okay.
Or the services that they have hosted on AWS. Okay. So if we are particularly looking at the misconfiguration that is particularly done by the client, then we don't have to take authorization from the AWS, because these services are offered by AWS but used by these clients. Okay. Right. You don't have to take authorization from AWS because you are looking at the misconfigurations that are done by the clients themselves, right? But if you want to, let's suppose if you want to pen test a S3 service or the services that Microsoft is taking care of, then you cannot do that because you have to take proper authorization from AWS.
Okay.
But if you are working on a client environment, then you don't have to care about AWS authorizations. Okay. Yeah,
sure. Let's start.
So let's assume with a scenario. Let's do a pen test then and there. So let's suppose you are a client, you come to me and you want to assess your, you want to come to me and you want me to assess your AWS environment. And you just told, again, we are going for a black box testing. You just gave me the name of your company. Okay. And what's the name of the company? Redfox. Okay. Don't know how you forgot that, but yeah, that's the name of the company, which is okay. So let's start with it. So what we do first, we will look at the public facing infrastructure of the company. Maybe a website hosted there, maybe they have their infrastructure that is public facing, right?
Yes.
Particularly a website. Most of the time it's a website. So what we can do, maybe we can start with the subdomain enumeration. or maybe we can start with phishing attacks, phishing simulations as well. We can also do, or we can look for OSINT techniques to get any credentials that are publicly available by mistake. So these kind of things.
Gathering more information.
Yeah. So let's start with subdomain enumeration. So for that, I am going to be using a tool called GoBuster. So let's do that. GoBuster. I am going to using the DNS module because we are enumerating the subdomains.
Can you help the viewers about how to install GoBuster as well?
Yeah, it's I think pretty forward. It's apt get install GoBuster. I think if you just search Google how to install GoBuster, it's pretty straightforward. Okay. So GoBuster, the name of the module is the DNS because we are brute forcing the subdomains of this domain. What is the domain? Tell me the domain.
You said.
Redfoxsec.com. Okay. Let's pen test our own website. Okay. And let's give a word list, which is user. That is stored on this location. User share word list. I think under this DNS directory, we have this. Okay. So this word list has a list of top 500 common subdomains. As we can see, these are some of the domains that is being used by our company, which is redfoxsec.com. We have the www subdomain, then we have web domain, and then we have lab.redfoxsec. And to which domain we are going to test, Tarak?
Lab.redfoxsec.com. It makes sense.
It makes sense, right? Because I don't have authorizations to test this www and web domain from our company. So this is the one that I am authorized to, which is lab.redfoxsec.com. Yes. That's what I'm going to perform actions on. So yeah, now we have the name of our company, name of this domain, subdomain, right? Let me just copy it. Let's run nmap and see what services are running on this domain. And let's hit enter. And let's wait for a few seconds. I think we are going to be coming up with the nmap playlist as well. Yes, so stay tuned for that on our YouTube channel. As we can see, we have two services running, which is SSH service as well as this HTTP service. We don't have a credential for the SSH service, right? Yes. So let's see what's on their HTTP service. I think they have maybe a website. Let's see what kind of website they have. Let me just open Firefox here. Let's go to this address, lab.redfoxsec.com. Okay, I think I think I have to give http://lab.redfoxsec.com. Hit enter. Okay, looks like they are hosting a Fox gallery there that has a list of images of foxes. I think they really love fox. That's why the name as well. Okay, so let's say that you came to me and you have your website like this. So we will start off with the web pen testing. I think if you have taken our course, then you can pretty easily hack this website.
Definitely. So
definitely, right?
yeah. So we have courses on web applications as well. So do check it out. We have a playlist as well. So it's at Redfox Security, there is a plethora of information that is available, and it's free of cost as well. But again, if you want to get more information and want to learn more advanced techniques, the advanced courses are available as well at training.redfoxsec.com.
I think it's academy.redfox, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, okay.
I think in one of the domains it's there. Right. Yeah. So yeah, let's start with this finding vulnerabilities in this website. Yes. So yeah, so what we can do? Let's see. Maybe what we can do. Maybe we can read the page source, or let's do that. Yeah. So when we read the page source, we will get to know the front end code, and if we can see there that the images that this website is taking from the S3 bucket. How I know it's a S3 bucket? If you look at the URL here you see https:// this is the name of the bucket, and .s3 name of the region, and then amazonaws.com, and then images is the folder or the bucket name. Then we have the name of the object or the image.
This is well explained in the slides as well.
Yeah. So from this information, if you see this bucket images stores three objects: fox1, fox2, fox3. Okay. So let me just copy. So this is how you will know that this website is using AWS. Okay. Also, you can also use other subdomain techniques to find out that your website uses this. But as we can see, it's straightforward that we are using this company lab.redfoxsec.com. This website is using some resources that are hosted on AWS. Okay, this is a clear indication that they are using some of the services of AWS. Maybe S3, EC2, maybe more services, right? Yeah, so let's copy this. And we know that it's a S3 bucket, right? So let's enumerate this S3 bucket. Okay, what's inside this bucket? So how we can enumerate? So you can
How are you going to do that?
How are you going to do that? So you can use AWS CLI. So AWS CLI provides a programmatic way to access AWS resources or services. Okay, so let's do that. So I am going to use AWS. So you can install AWS CLI. So AWS, name of the service S3. Name of the module, let's say that we want to list the contents of this bucket. So ls for listing it, and then we will specify the name of the bucket. I think S3 : / name of this bucket. Okay, I think I have to remove this thing. That's the name of the bucket, which is okay. So this is the, I think I made a mistake here. Let me just
That's fine.
clarify it.
Yeah.
So where is it? Yeah. So again, this images is not the name of the bucket. This is the folder inside this bucket. So this is the name of the bucket. Okay. Bucket name .s3.region.amazonaws.com / name of the folder that is inside this bucket, and then the object name. Okay. So yeah, so that's the bucket that we want to enumerate. So let's enumerate it.
Sure.
Let's see. Again, looks like we don't have any credentials set up. Okay. So what we can do, I think there is an option called no sign request. So using unauthenticated access, you can enumerate it.
Okay.
So there are some, as I told you, misconfigurations can happen in a bucket, right? So a bucket can be publicly accessed. As we can see that these Fox images are I think they are publicly accessible. Let me just let me just copy it. Copy link, and let me just paste it. And as we can, since it is publicly accessible, anyone can download it, right? So we will assume that this bucket is publicly accessible, and it is storing the images of these Foxes.
The application.
Yeah. Okay, these are the applications. These are the images of these Foxes. Okay. Now let's do one thing. Yeah. So we can, since we don't have any credential, right? We will go with this option, no sign request. So it will not ask for authentication. And let's see. Okay. Looks like they have given permission, the read-only permission to all the unauthorized users for this entire bucket.
Okay.
That's why instead of this images folder, we are also seeing a data folder as well. Okay, that's where misconfiguration is. So if they would have set up this IAM or bucket policy on this images folder itself, not the bucket but the images folder, so that only this images folder is publicly accessible.
So basically there would be no room for unauthorized access.
Yeah, for this data folder. As you can see, there is another folder that we can see, that the data folder.
Yeah.
Looks interesting, right?
Yes, totally.
So
Something sensitive over there.
let's see what sensitive is here. Images we already know, right? What sort of images.
Yeah.
So let me just quickly show this as well. So images will have this Fox 1, Fox 2, Fox 3 JPG files. And let's look for this data.
Oh. There you have it.
There you have it. Yeah, sometimes you get lucky. So we are laughing here, but there are times that we have seen sensitive information that is publicly available,
Exactly.
right?
It does happen.
It does happen. So yeah. So what we can do, let's download it. because right now we are using the list permissions here. Let's say we do whether do we have a download permission or get permission on this object or not. What we can do, let's try to download it, and if we don't have permissions, we will get denied. Okay. So S3, let's copy it. Let me just copy this, paste it. So that's the object they want to download, and let's name it as the same thing. Okay, now let's try to download it. I think it's trying. Yeah, if you see, download to this file. Okay, now let's see passwords. Okay, as you can see, there are some credentials as well as a IP also available, right? So we now know that we have a IP and we have the probable username and the password as well, right? So let's enumerate this IP, what this have, what are the services running on this IP, right? Okay. So again, the same thing. And let's remember the username password as well, which is admin and password 123. Let me just remember. Then let's do one thing. Nmap against this this IP address, and let's see what sort of services are running on this IP address. As we can see, same services like on this IP as well. We have SSH as well as HTTP service. Okay, and we have a credential as well, right? So let's try to log in into the SSH service. SSH. Name of, let's go for root user. Okay. Okay, looks like the root user don't have the permission to log in on this machine using the password. So there is another default user on the EC2 instances, majorly AWS Linux instances, which is EC2 user. That's the default user. So let's try for that. Maybe we can use that password 123 credential for this user. Oh, so again we are seeing permission denied. Okay. What can we do here now? We have another service running, which is HTTP service, right? Yes. So looks like we cannot log in via SSH service. So let's try for this. What's running on this HTTP service, right? So let me just copy this IP address. This one. Let's see what's running on this website. Okay. So it's looking for a basic authentication. Maybe you can brute force this using Hydra. So we also have a Hydra playlist on your YouTube channel as well that you can see to try to brute force it. But we already have the credentials with us. Maybe this might work on this this authentication page. So let's try that. Admin, I think password was password 123. Okay, looks like we are successfully logged in. Okay, now we have a system information dashboard here. Maybe this is the dashboard page that is used by the client themselves, maybe to find out the system information for this machine. Okay. The EC2 instance, maybe. So let's click on users. Okay, it's showing the uses of the basically the size of the files that are stored on this that instance, and this memory usage is showing how much memory is allocated and how much amount of memory is free. So what can we do that, right? What can we do with this? I don't think we can do anything with this because it's safe, right? Is it, Tarak?
Yes.
Is it safe?
Not really. Because you can see a lot of sensitive information being displayed.
Yeah. So let's try to pen test this dashboard as well.
And talking about your Hydra course, it has been specially made by Sashi. And secondly, we have another channel that's Redfox Bharat, and there we are uploading a number of videos. So if you can, it's from Hindi, Marathi, and a lot of other languages that are all Indian languages. So you can do check that channel out as well, and you can just drop a like and subscribe there as well.
So yeah, let's try to pen test it. So let's open up our very favorite tool.
I know the Bible.
Let's open burp suit. Yeah, let's open burp suit. So again, we have a playlist on our English channel, which is Redfox YouTube channel.
Yes.
I think Tarak especially has prepared
Yeah,
that.
sure. So it's like burp suit. We have a playlist on our YouTube as well. You can check it out. So it's right from starting burp suit to configuring it to testing web applications as well. So do check it out on our YouTube channel.
Yeah. So let's start burp suit and let's try to capture the request and see what sort of request is going to the website itself. Okay. I think I already have Foxy proxy set up with my this browser. Where is that? Oh yeah, so this was the website, right?
Yes.
So let's try to intercept this request. So we are going to be using Foxy proxy. Let's enable it so that burp can intercept it. Let's turn on the intercept here. I think let me just close these steps.
Sure. Do understand that all of these practicals that are being displayed are solely for educational purposes. Please do not try this at your home, work or organization, because in case you get into any trouble, Redfox Security is not responsible for it.
Yeah. So let's intercept it. Let's intercept this request.
Usage request. Okay.
As we can see that it is a post request. It is going to this endpoint system info. And it is going on this disk. It is using this disk parameter value for this info type parameter. Let's send it to repeater and let's see. Let's understand this request. As you can see, when we send this request on the repeater tab, it's giving 200 OK and the same details as we saw on the web page. Let's try to do some testing with this parameter itself. So let's try with the quotes. That's what we generally do to try to get some error from the application. Maybe if they don't have proper error handling, we might get something.
Yes.
So let's do that.
And in a lot of cases, we do actually get some amount of information in the error as well.
Okay. When we send the request, if you see, it says command failed. And it is trying some bin bash, some syntax error is coming. So I think it is using this bin bash to execute this command on the Linux system. It looks like, right? So we can opt for command injection vulnerability here. So what we can do, we can just change this command using, let me just remove the quote and using semicolon. So semicolon is the way to run multiple commands. We can combine multiple commands.
Yes.
So let's, which command you want me to run, Tarak?
It's your choice again.
So we can give who am I command.
Yeah,
I think that's
most basic one.
That's what we can do. Who am I command?
And it's completely fine if you're not familiar with command injection and all of this stuff, because all of this is covered in our web application course, which is offered at academy.redfoxed.com.
So again, all these courses and upcoming courses are linked. So if you see right now, I'm talking about AWS Pentesting, but again I'm showing web part because you need to learn that as well. So let's try to who am I and let's send. As you can see that we are the root user on this machine. Okay. I think we have a command execution. So maybe let's do hostname. Okay. So looks like we are already root on this machine. So maybe we can get a reverse shell or something like that. But that will only limit our access to this machine itself, right? Since we are a root user on this machine, we are limited to that, right? But as I told you that AWS has, the AWS instance has service called instance metadata service. And if a role is assumed or if a role is attached to this EC2 instance, let's suppose, then you can carry out the credentials of the role from this instance metadata service. Okay. So how you can do that? So you can query that out using the curl command, and it is hosted at this address. I think let me just fix it. Curl http://169.254.169.254/ let's just send it. As we can see, we are getting some data or metadata. Looks like we are getting some folders which has these versions. Looks like 2011, 12. So we will go for this PC. There is a latest as well. So we will go for this latest one because AWS is revising the changes, and the latest is the latest one, right? So let's see what's inside this latest folder. Send it, and yeah, so inside this latest folder we have two types of folders, which is metadata folder and user data folder. And as we saw in the slides, that metadata service holds the password or the credential for the roles, and this user data will stores the scripts that we want that will run on the when the system logs on. So inside this user data you can go for the scripts, or if you want to go for metadata and get access to the credentials, we can go for this metadata folder. So let's do that. Metadata / send it, and as we can see here, I think is there a spelling mistake here? Oh, okay, double T. Okay, metadata send. And as you can see, there are again some folders are available here. We can see that host name, identity credentials, instance actions, instance ID, lot of folders available to us, right? So there is another folder called IAM. If you see here, there is a folder called IAM. So this folder has the credential of the roles that are attached to this instance service. Okay. And this is by default. We are not guessing anything. This is the endpoint that I am creating here. It's the by default endpoint to get this credential from this metadata service. Okay. And let's again send the request. And as you can see, inside this IAM folder, we have another folder which is security credentials. So let's copy that again and paste it here. Let's see what's inside this. So inside this folder, we see a role here, and the role name is EC2 S3 access role. Looks interesting, right? Yeah. So let's just copy this role and see and get to the credentials of this role. Okay, now let's send it. Whoa. As we can see, we have the access keys and the tokens for this access role. Okay, so how AWS is giving this credential to these roles? Using the STS service. Okay. So using the basically whenever a role wants to access its credentials, or a EC2 instance using this assumed role, it want to access the credentials, it will go to this endpoint, and this endpoint will query the STS service, and from that it will get this credential. These are the temporary token. So it will expire after some time, but anytime if it is expired, you can just go to this endpoint. Even if you click send again you will get the data. And if you see, this is the expiry time of this. So again, this is a short-term credential. This is not a long-term credential. So yeah, let's see how we can use these credentials and see what sort of permissions that are attached to this role, which is EC2-S3-access role. Okay. How we can do that? We can enumerate manually using AWS CLI, or you can enumerate using tools as well. So there are many tools available for cloud pen testing. I think we have one of the major one, which is the Pacu. Pacu is the name of the tool, which is developed by Rhino Security Labs. We have other tools like Scout Suit. I think Redfox also have one of the tools. So yeah, so these are some of the tools we are going to in this podcast. I am going to showcasing Pacu. So this is going to a very basic video on Pacu. I am not going to be in detail because we will have some other podcast on Pacu. But yeah, this time yeah. So let's use Pacu to see what sort of permission that this role has using these credentials. Okay. So let's configure Pacu. So again, I think I have already set up Pacu with me. So let's do that.
Pacu, I must say.
Yeah. So first you have to choose a session.
Yeah.
So let's create a new session using the 0 option. What would you like to? Okay, let's name this session podcast. And yeah, so it is trying to set up a session, and this session requires some credentials, right? As you can see right now, this podcast session has no keys set, so we already have the keys with us. So let's use those keys to set up it. I think first we have to set using the set module, set underscore keys. We can set keys. So first we have to give an alias for these keys. So let's give EC2 S3 keys, okay, or role keys. Hit enter, and it will ask for access key ID. I think we already have it. Let's just copy it. Paste it here. Then it will ask for the secret access key. Here is the secret access key. Let's copy it, paste it here, and then it's the session token that we have to go. We also have that as well.
Lots of information in the error, it seems.
Yep. Let's copy that and let's paste it. Okay. Now we have the key setup. As we can see, this is the session and this is the alias for our keys. Okay. So let's start with the first command, which is who am I, and it just returned us the data. It is just gave us the same thing, access key and other things as well. Let's see what are the modules available by Pacu. So let's do ls to list the modules. So these are the modules that are available. I think this is if you want to perform reconnaissance unauthenticated, you can use these modules. If you want to go for persistence, you can use this. If you want evasion, you can use these. For lateral movement, these are available. For enumeration, looks like a lot more available. So these are the modules that you can use to enumerate.
Okay.
I think right now we already passed the initial access phase because we have the credential. Now we are on the enumeration phase. If we go via the cyber kill chain, so these are some of the modules: the exploit, other exfiltration, escalate, others. Right. So right now we want to enumerate, right? So let's enumerate. So which service we want to enumerate? So let's go for EC2 enum. So as you can see, these are the services like EC2, ECR, ECS, Glue. So these are the services. So let's enumerate this. So how you can run it? So let me just first let's understand about this module, EC2 enum module. So let's understand something about it. So as we can see, we can use these options. We can to enumerate an instance. We can provide an instance name.
Yes.
To enumerate EC2 service for a specific region, we can go for regions, and there are much more options available. So let's just directly use this option EC2 enum for a specific region. Let's see what sort of EC2 services are running for a client. Right now you are my client. So what sort of services you have ran in the Mumbai region? Let's find out that. EC2 enum dash region. This is the code for Mumbai region, which is AP South 1. Unrecognized command. Why? Because we have to give this run option here to run this module. So let's run this module, and it will enumerate. It will go through. It will try to find all the services that are running in this EC2 services which are running inside this Mumbai region. Looks like we are getting some failure, access denied, 0 instance found, no security groups found. Looks like this credential don't have the privileges to enumerate EC2 services, or maybe that there is no service present, no resources present in this service. What else we can do? So let's enumerate other services. So again, ls for list the services. Let's enumerate buckets. So we can use this module, which is S3 download bucket. So basically this is an exfiltration module. So what it will do, it will query out all the bucket names, and it will try to download all the contents from these buckets, providing we have the access, this role have the access.
Yeah, that is the most important thing, right? Because initially when we did the thing, but we could not have, because we did not have access to the files. Now let's see if we get some access in S3 bucket.
Yeah. So I think let's try the help option to see what sort of options available. There is a DL to download option. There is names only. You just enumerate the bucket names. So I think by default it's a download. So let's set to download all the contents. So let's run it. Try to download all the contents. Okay, looks like these are the buckets that are available for you that you have set up. So these are some of the buckets. But looks like you are getting some authorization error. That's why this IAM service is very important to understand, so that you will know when you get an error why this error is happening. So looks like you don't have some sort of permissions to download these the objects in these buckets. So yeah, but we have this names only flag, right? So I think we give this dash names only. I think run, we have to give run. It will just give us the names. It will not download it, it will just give us the name. So looks like we have this role has the list permission. That's why we are able to get to the names of the buckets as well. If this role don't have this permission set up to get or to list this object, we will not get that. Okay, so that's what we can assume, that this role has this the list role, listing role, right? So which one is looking interesting? Let's say we have this S3 vulnerable Fox lab, because yeah, so that's what we can use. Since we don't have the permissions, right? I think we have the permission to download things, but again, if you see, we are getting some other error. Is not authorization to perform. Okay, so basically here, if you see, that's why I'm saying you have to understand these IAM permission policies, because if you see, maybe we have the download role, but we don't have is this permission. That is maybe the Pacu is using in the background to perform some actions. Okay, to query something. So looks like we don't have this CloudWatch get metric statistics role permission. So that might be the reason maybe we have this role has the download permission, but this role don't have this permission exactly which Pacu is using. It is giving us some authorization errors, but we might have the download rules, right? So again, don't solely rely on the tools. We can also have manually, you can enumerate using AWS CLI. So let's use that. So let's try to enumerate this bucket, S3 vulnerable Fox. Let me just copy it. Again, AWS S3, which is the name of service. ls, let's try to list the contents of this bucket. S3:/ bucket name, and hit enter. Okay, looks like we don't have any credential. That's why it's asking for us to configure some credentials. But again, as we saw in the previous example of the previous bucket that we were enumerating, we use this no sign request option. No sign request. So right now we are enumerating this unauthenticated. Okay. And let's see. And if we see that we are getting list buckets version 2 operation is access denied. It means that unauthenticated user don't have list permission on this bucket. Basically that's why. But let's set up this role credentials that we have.
You really are creating a lot of suspense right now.
Yeah. So yeah. So let's see. But we know that this role has this listing permission, at least the list permissions. That's why the Pacu was able to get to the names of the buckets, right? So let's set up the credentials so that the AWS CLI can use these credentials, and then using those credentials we can try to enumerate this bucket. Okay, let's do that. What we can do here, so how we can set up, you can use AWS configure option to configure the credentials, or you can directly export using the export. You can export the these key value pairs, or the other thing you can use, you can set this credential in a file called I think it's called credentials, if I'm not wrong. So let me just try directly writing in this file so that AWS CLI can use it. I think it's inside this folder dot AWS slash I think it's credentials. Yeah. So that's the name of the file that AWS CLI by default uses to look for the credentials. Yeah, looks like we have some credentials already set up, but I don't think this is we can use. Let me just copy so that we can change the values at least. What is happening here? Okay, I think I copied this as well. Okay. Okay, I think yeah. So this is the credentials that we want to configure. I think let's give a profile name as well. Let's give podcast, just an alias name to use the credentials. Access key ID. Where is my cursor? Let's copy it from here. Let's paste it here. Give the secret access key. Well, not so secret. Here it is. I think it's still there. Copy. Let's paste it here. And then finally we have to provide the credentials. So the session token itself. So let's copy and paste it. And let's save this file. Okay, so we now have a profile called podcast that we can use to provide AWS the credentials of the that role.
So CLI is going to basically use that as the default one.
So these credentials are attached to this role.
Nice.
Which role? This role. EC2-S3-access role.
Yeah.
Okay. And this role is attached to the instance. Okay. Basically, this role is attached to the instance, and from that instance we get to this role. And this role, using the metadata endpoint, we can get to the credentials that is assigned to this role. Now we will try to find out whether this role has some permission of the S3 bucket or not. Okay. So let's use the same option. This time, instead of no request, let's use this profile using the profile option, podcast. Okay, let's see. Okay, looks like this role has some access over this bucket, which is S3 vulnerable Fox lab. Okay, as we can see, we have two directories, two folders available in this bucket, which is .ssh and images. Which one do you want me to go, Tarak?
Use it. SSH.
Let's go with
SSH. Images, I think we already had been there.
No. I think so. This is a different bucket. Okay. If you see, that had credentials. Data in that data folder, it has credentials. This is a different bucket that we are enumerating here. Again, the same folders, which is these are the folders. So let's go inside this SSH folder and let's see what's inside this folder. Looks like we have some other credentials, rightly so. And let's try to download it. Let's see if this role has the get actions to on this bucket or on the objects of this bucket. It can download it. So let's try to do that. S3 copy creds.txt and let's save it with the same name. Looks like the creds are already downloaded. So cred, what's inside this.
Oh, looks like we have the SSH key.
Yeah, looks like we have basically you as a client have saved your private key on this bucket and made this bucket available to this role that I have just hacked into. Okay,
What are my
You are
developers?
thinking that it's secure.
What are my developers doing right now?
So you are thinking that it's secure because this is not publicly accessible bucket, but this role has access to this bucket, and we exploited the vulnerabilities in the web application to get access to the instance metadata service, and from that metadata service we get to the access credentials that are attached to this role, which is EC2-S3 access role. That's why.
More like an escalation.
Yeah. So we have some this looks like a private key of instance maybe, and I think if we saw the these passwords, we have an IP with us, right? So maybe and this IP we saw from SSH from Nmap that this IP is also running apart from this website, the dashboard website. It also running a SSH service, right? Yes. So maybe we can try logging in to that service. So let me just quickly copy this thing. Yeah. Let's copy this thing, and I think actually we don't have to copy it. Yeah, what we can do, so we already have the creds file, right? So what we can do, we can just try to logging in with that private file or the private key. What we can do, let's try to do that. I think we have to change the permissions on that file, chmod 400. Yeah, I think let me just increase this thing. Yeah, so we can just change the permissions on this private file. I think we have to go 400 so that it will be valid for the SSH session. creds.txt, let me just give the permissions, and then using this we can try to log in. I think I again forgot the IP address, so let me just copy this.
That's fine.
ssh-i creds, which is the private file. Let's use the root user, name of the IP address, and try to do that, try to log in. Looks like we are getting permission denied. Maybe we don't, these keys are not for the root user. So again, there is another default user which is called EC2 user. Let's try to do that for that. Oh, looks like these SSH keys are for this EC2 user. Now again, if you see, we are now able to access this from this the key that is stored in the private in the bucket. Using that key we are able to access this machine. Now we are inside this machine. So this is how you can exploit misconfigurations in S3 buckets, in EC2 IMDS service to get to some credentials or sensitive information. So I think my lab ends here, the demo lab ends here. I think so again, let me just repeat what we have done till now in my lab. So as a client, you came to me looking for the assessment of your cloud infrastructure. So I just have the name of your company, right? So first what I did, I used GoBuster to enumerate the subdomains. There I found a subdomain called lab.redfox.com. Then I went to that website, and on that website I saw images of some foxes, and when I look at the source code, I got to know the bucket name. Then I tried to find whether this bucket is publicly accessible or not, but in that case the bucket was publicly accessible, as well as the permissions are misconfigured. So that, why I am saying permission was misconfigured, because apart from this images bucket, maybe this data, apart from this images folder in that bucket, there is another folder called data, which maybe don't mean to be publicly accessible. From that data folder we get to know the IP that might be internal IP of yours that you might be using, and from that IP that has a username and password. And when I go to that IP address, there is another website hosted at that IP address which requires a basic authentication. Maybe you're thinking that's secure because it has basic authentication. But in that S3 bucket data folder, we have the credentials as well of the basic authentication page as well. So we use the admin and its password to log in into that application. And on that application we have a dashboard system. There what we did, using burp, we find out that the parameter is vulnerable to command injection. Basically the website is vulnerable to command injection. So we performed a command injection vulnerability to query data from the IMDS metadata service, and which data we retrieved the credential of the role, which was EC2-S3-access role. Role access, I think it was that. So from the IMDS data service, metadata service, we got to know the credentials of that role. Then what we did, then using that credential, we set up our Pacu tool, and from that Pacu, we enumerated EC2 and other services as well. But we got to find out that this role has some access on your S3 service, basically list the S3 bucket service. So there we got to know about some of the buckets. So using Pacu, we tried to download it, but we were not able to do that. Then we switched to the AWS CLI. So in AWS CLI, we configured the AWS CLI to use the credential attached to this role. And then from there, we enumerated this bucket. This time, apart from listing the buckets, we saw that we have the permissions to list the objects inside the buckets as well as to download the bucket objects. So there we found a folder, interesting folder called .ssh. On that folder, we found the private key. And using that private key, we get access to the instance, which I think this is the instance that was running initially your Fox page. I think this is the one that is hosting that, because I have set up this lab, so I know. So using that SSH keys, you are able to log into this this machine, and maybe this machine also has some role attached to it, and then you can further escalate. So again, you can chain different vulnerabilities and different misconfiguration to escalate your privileges into this AWS environment until you get access to some very sensitive data, or maybe you can get access to the root user, or maybe any other high privilege user to basically compromise the entire AWS account. So this is the one of the labs that I have just created to showcase some of the misconfigurations. So yeah, I think our lab ends here. I think let's switch back to the. Do you have anything?
No,
yeah. Let's go back to the PPT. Yeah. I hope that practical was a very insightful practical for our viewers, so that they can learn all. That's why I was very much focused on the theory.
Yeah, exactly.
So that they can understand the practical well.
Yep. More about the IAM part and the policies that were really important.
Yeah. So yeah, what strategies you can use to prevent the leakage of these S3 buckets? First thing, so again, as I told you that these S3 buckets are private by default, right? But but if you want to make this bucket publicly accessible, or maybe use some other resources, then you have to set up some bucket policy or IAM policies. So you have to audit your access policies that are attached to this bucket. That's what you can do, and you can maybe possibly can find a misconfiguration there. So always be careful about the star wildcard, because star means everything, right? So unknowingly you might be giving me access to all the information, all the data objects in the bucket. Other thing is that use S3 public access settings to restrict public access. So there is another setting. So using this setting, you can block all the public access. So if you don't want your buckets to be publicly available, you can just using this one single setting, you can block the access. That's what you can do for prevent the leakage of your S3 buckets. And what are the prevention strategies for EC2? First, you have to protect your website that are hosted on this EC2 instances, right? So in this scenario, we have to protect again the command injection protection, which is whitelisting or blacklisting the parameters, or you can validate user inputs, right? You can always validate user inputs and allow only the inputs that you want. Okay. You can opt for IMDS basically, but if you have command injection, I don't think you can protect again IMDS v2. But maybe if your website is vulnerable to SSRF, so use IMDS v2. There is no reason to switch back to the older IMDS version 1. Okay. And another thing is that restrict the IAM role permission access. Maybe that EC2 S3 role access we got, maybe don't require the download permissions from that bucket. Maybe. Or maybe not. But yeah, so again, you have to limit access to this service by basically auditing these roles and find out where are the misconfigurations.
Great.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah, surely. So it was really great having you in the podcast. So we started off with AWS Pentesting today. So it doesn't really stop here, because at Redfox Security we will be having more and more of podcasts, more of content. So again, there's a special course that is based on web application and Active Directory. It is solely available on our academy.redfox.com. Apart from that, there is a plethora of information that is available on YouTube. There are shorts, there are podcasts. That also there will be upcoming. We will be in upcoming conferences as well. So do check it out. And as always, we'll see. The point is, in this podcast, there was a limited amount of information, because again, AWS Pentesting, it's a huge amount of
topic. As I saw, there are lots of services. We just discussed in brief about 3 services.
Yes, exactly. But again, Sashi did the best part of letting you guys know about what's more specific to your pen test as well. And again, we'll meet you in the next podcast as well. So stay tuned, and please do make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. And again, apart from Redfox Security, there's a new channel that we have launched, that is Redfox Bharat, Redfox Security Bharat. You can also check out that channel as well, and the link will be in the description and in front of you. Thank you for joining us. Have a good day.
Yeah, thank you guys.